Topic 3.1 Contextualizing State Building. Imagine a grand palace, gold and glittering in the European sunlight. But this palace isn't just a symbol of wealth, it's a symbol of power and control, an emblem of a shifting Europe from fragmented feudal territories to centralized nation states. This is the Europe of 1648 to 1815, a Europe on the cusp of modern state building. As AP European history students, you've journeyed into the Renaissance, witnessed the turmoil of the Reformation, and now stand on the threshold of a new Europe. One of the challenges you may be grappling with is understanding the intricate dance of power and politics that occurred during this period. What was at stake? Why did states form the way they did? What role did individuals, groups, and events play in the state building process? State building from 1648 to 1815 is not just about dates or names. It's about an attempt to understand the mechanisms that shaped our modern world. And here's the good news. If you understand this topic well, you have a key to unlock a significant portion of the AP test. But how do we navigate this intricate web? We'll start by a look into the context of political power development from 1648 to 1815. Go through the challenges the monarchs faced, the rise of minority groups, and the emergence of different forms of governance. After this journey, a surprise awaits. From the end of the 30 Years' War in 1648 to the end of the Napoleonic Wars in 1815, Europe underwent significant political transformation. The struggle for sovereignty saw varying degrees of political centralization. The sovereign state and secular law. A linchpin of this era was the sovereign state. It meant that the state had absolute authority within its borders. With this, secular systems of law began to overshadow religious laws, shaping new political institutions. But these shifts weren't straightforward. Competition between monarchs and nobles. Kings and queens sought more power, but they had opponents. In France, Louis XIII and his minister, Cardinal Richelieu, sought to curb the power of the nobility, ensuring royal dominance. However, their policies were met with resistance like the Fronde, a series of civil wars in France where nobles rebelled against royal authority. Similarly, in Spain, the Catalan revolts saw regions like Catalonia resisting the centralizing efforts of the Spanish monarchy. Therefore, while monarchs pushed for centralized power, nobles clung to traditional shared governance and regional autonomy. Competition between minority and dominant national groups. As states tried to centralize, minority groups resisted. In the Celtic regions of Scotland, Ireland, and France, native groups resisted domination by their English or French rulers. The Dutch in the Spanish Netherlands rose against Spanish rule, and in the Holy Roman Empire, the Czechs remembered figures like Jan Hus and events like the Defenestration became symbols of their unique identity and resistance. Cossacks under Pugachev tried to end the Russian imperial system and died in the process. But the story doesn't end there. Challenges to absolutism. While many states, especially in Eastern Europe, like Russia, moved towards absolute monarchy, not all did. Challenges to this absolutism saw the emergence of alternative political systems. England's challenge. The English Civil War in the mid-17th century was a significant rebuttal to the notion of absolute monarchy. King Charles I believed in the divine right of kings and tried to govern without parliament. This led to a conflict between the monarchy and parliament, culminating in the execution of Charles I. The monarchy was eventually restored, but the power dynamics had shifted. By the end of the 17th century, with the Glorious Revolution and the establishment of the constitutional monarchy, the monarch's power was limited by law and parliaments. France's varied journey. While France is often seen as the epitome of absolutism, especially under Louis XIV, the Sun King, it too had its challenges. The earlier mentioned Fronde was a direct rebellion against central authority. And though Louis XIV managed to consolidate his power, his successors found it harder to maintain, leading to financial crises and eventually the French Revolution at the end of the 18th century. The Holy Roman Empire's unique case. This vast conglomerate of territories in Central Europe was anything but absolute. The emperor had limited authority over the numerous princes, electors, and bishops who ruled the various regions. It was a patchwork of different political systems, and the centralized power that absolutism demanded was challenging, if not impossible, to implement. The Napoleonic Wars in the era of Napoleon Bonaparte represent a complex period in European history that can be seen both as a challenge to traditional absolutism and an embrace of certain aspects of it. Let's break down this duality. How was it a challenge to traditional absolutism? There was the French Revolution's legacy. The wars were an outgrowth of the French Revolution, which was fundamentally a challenge to the Ancien regime and the absolutist Bourbon monarchy of France. The revolution sought to replace absolutism with Enlightenment principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity. Liberté, égalité, et fraternité. Spread of revolutionary ideals. As Napoleon and his Grande Armée conquered vast swaths of Europe, they carried with them these revolutionary principles. Feudal systems were abolished in many regions. Legal reforms based on the Napoleonic Code were introduced, and many of the territories saw the establishment of constitutions and somewhat representative institutions. End of the Holy Roman Empire. One of the traditional bastions of decentralized power in Europe, the Holy Roman Empire was dissolved by Napoleon in 1806, signaling an end to a significant component of the old European order. Now, the embrace of absolutist tendencies. Napoleon's rule. While Napoleon initially rose to power championing the principles of the revolution, once he became Emperor of the French in 1804, his rule took on characteristics reminiscent of absolutist monarchs. He held centralized power, censored the press, and suppressed opposition. Napoleonic Code. While the Napoleonic Code, introduced in 1804, standardized legal systems and is hailed for its progressive stance on property rights and equality before the law, it also rolled back some revolutionary gains, particularly in areas like women's rights. Continental system. Napoleon's foreign policy, particularly the continental system, which sought to economically isolate Britain, was an example of top-down, heavy-handed governance that affected all of Europe. This policy could be seen as an absolutist move to control the economies of a vast region. Restoration of monarchies. As Napoleon conquered territories, he often placed members of his own family on the throne of these regions, creating a network of puppet monarchies. This was reminiscent of dynastic politics and did not align with the revolutionary ideal of self-determination. The impact of the Napoleonic Wars on average citizens varied widely based on region, occupation, and specific circumstances, but several broad trends can be highlighted. Economic hardship, military conscription, that means draft, and casualties, cultural and administrative changes, displacement and migration, civil strife and partisan warfare. And in the end, Europe was politically reconfigured at the Congress of Vienna in 1815. Monarchies were restored and the political map was redrawn. The spread of revolutionary ideals did have a lasting impact. In many regions, the seeds of nationalism and liberalism had been sown, which would later lead to movements and revolutions in the 19th century. And as Europe stood at the crossroads in 1815, after the devastation of the Napoleonic Wars, these struggles laid the foundation for the next phase, the age of revolutions, the quest for democracy, and the rise of nationalism. As the old saying goes, history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. The state building of 1648 to 1815 set the rhyme scheme for the tumultuous 19th century. And here we have Louis XIV and Napoleon contributing a few bars.